A punctured tire. A man was driving his car all the way from New York to Boston. Only at the end of the trip did he discover that one of his car's tires had been punctured from the very beginning. Still, he managed to reach his destination successfully, and his journey wasn't affected by this problem. How is it possible? The punctured tire was the spare one. A tricky ploy. A big company director returned from lunch and discovered that his safe had been broken into and all the money had been taken from it. Inside, he saw a note, "Don't even consider calling the police." Well, the man did exactly the opposite. He called the police and told them he suspected that his half-brother David was to blame. One of the police officers visited David and asked him several questions, but the man showed the detective his right arm, which was in a cast. "Look, I broke my arm just a couple of days ago. I couldn't get into my brother's office or write a note." The police officer had nothing to do but leave. He decided to have lunch in a cafe across the road from David's apartment. Half an hour later, the detective noticed the man leaving home. At that very moment, the detective realized that the brother was guilty after all and rushed to arrest him. How did he understand? The police officer noticed that while leaving the apartment, David had the cast not on his right but on his left arm. Is he smart enough? One day, a cute new guy, Tom, joined Katie's class. All her classmates had a crush on him, and he clearly knew about his popularity. But whatever they did, Tom didn't pay attention to any of their signs of affection, and his eyes were only for Katie. She also liked him a lot, but she wanted to make sure he wasn't just cute but smart too. So once, when they stayed alone in the classroom, Katie walked up to the whiteboard, took the marker, and wrote 128 square root sign E 980. Tom looked at it for a few seconds and then smiled, and Katie knew he cracked her riddle. Can you? Mathematically, this riddle doesn't make any sense, but if you wipe the upper half of the whole expression, you'll get "I love you." Takes a bit of wit, huh? A fired manager. Mark, Jim, and Bob work as managers in the same office. One day, one of them is fired, and one gets a promotion. The remaining manager wants to resign at first, but then changes his mind. You know that the one who's fired is older than the rest and single. Jim's younger than the manager who has decided to stay at work, and he doesn't know Bob's wife. Who's fired? It's not Jim because he's younger than the manager who stays. It's also not Bob because he's married. It means that Mark has been fired, Jim has got a promotion, and Bob has decided to stay in his position. An antique dealer's riddle. David was a famous antique dealer in his town, but there were loads of people who envied him. The man had a young, beautiful daughter, Lisa. One evening, when the antiquarian was busy in his workshop, his phone rang. A man told him that they had David's daughter. If he wanted to see her again, he had to give his jewelry collection to a man waiting at the doors. It wasn't the first time someone was threatening David. That's why he requested to talk to his daughter. He asked her just one question. "I have two hands, but I can't scratch myself. What am I?" When David heard no answer, he said, "It's not my daughter," and hung up. What's the answer to this riddle? Lisa would know that her father was talking about a clock. A driver's problem. A man was driving along a countryside road when one of his car tires burst. While changing it, he accidentally lost all four wheel nuts. The road was deserted, and the driver was afraid he'd have to spend many hours waiting for someone who could give him a hand. But a kid passing by his vehicle said something that helped the man solve his problem. What advice did the child give the driver? The kid told the man to remove one nut from each of the remaining wheels and use them to secure the new tire. This way, the man could get to the nearest service station. Notorious Shoplifters. Detectives had been trying to catch two infamous shoplifters for several years, and finally, after another case, they managed to capture one of the culprits. Police officers were interrogating him for 2 days, but he said nothing about the goods and money they'd taken or his accomplices' whereabouts. Still, in the next 24 hours, the detectives managed to find the place where the stuff was hidden. It was a small house in the suburbs. In its basement, there was a man who seemed very excited to see the police. He said he'd been trapped in the house already for a week. Nobody visited him, and he was starting to run out of food. That's why he was so happy to read the good news in the paper. The police officers immediately realized it was the accomplice they'd been looking for. How? If he was trapped in the basement, how could he get a hold of fresh newspapers? 2 buckets. You have 2 buckets of water. In the first bucket, the water is heated up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In the second bucket, the water is cooled down to minus 100 degrees. You need to simultaneously drop 2 coins into the buckets. Which coin will reach the bottom faster? The coin thrown into the warm water. The other won't sink at all because the water in the bucket is frozen. Let it go. Important documents. John, the director of a big company, managed to persuade his partners to sign a super important agreement. He then put this document into a folder and left it on the table in his private office. When he returned to work the next morning, the folder was gone. Surprise, surprise. John gathered all the employees who were in the office at that time and questioned them. The cleaning lady said she had been busy washing the floor and hadn't paid attention to anything around. The designer explained he hadn't left his working place even once. What's more, being an artist, he didn't have any interest in agreement documents. The accountant admitted that he had entered John's office to have some documents signed, but once he noticed there was no one inside, he immediately left. Who took the folder with the agreement? It was the designer. Otherwise, how would he know that the missing folder had an agreement inside? Socks puzzle. Matthew wears either only black or only white socks. One evening, he's in a hurry, getting ready for a romantic dinner with his girlfriend. Suddenly, the power goes out. The guy has 10 white and 10 black socks in his drawer, but all of them are mixed. If it's completely dark in the room and Matthew can't see anything, how many socks must he pull out of the drawer to get 2 matching ones? Just 3. In a set of 3 socks, he's bound to have 2 socks of the same color. A smart teacher. One day, a teacher decided to give her students a test, but all of them refused to take it. She could give detention for skipping the test to only one student. All of them knew each other's names. If a student knew they were going to get detention, they agreed to take the test. How could the teacher make all the students participate? She told them that she'd give detention to the student whose name came first alphabetically. Then this person wouldn't skip the test. The next person on the list wouldn't skip as well, and so on until the end of the list. Hidden treasure. Martha really loved her little sister Mary, but once she had to go away for the whole day. She didn't want Mary to miss her too much or get bored. That's why she organized a treasure hunt for the girl. Before Martha left, she gave her little sister a map. She told the girl if she followed the instructions, she'd find a real treasure. Mary followed the map to a T. She made the exact number of steps and turned at all the right spots. She eventually got to the end and started digging. The little girl dug and dug, but still found nothing. Naturally, she was pretty upset. When Martha got back, she took the map and almost immediately found the treasure. How so? Martha made one major mistake when she was drawing the map. Her steps were a lot bigger than Mary's. That's why the younger girl couldn't find the spot where Martha had hidden the treasure. What happened to Prom King? Soon after Bob became king on prom night, he vanished. Poof, like that. His teachers were looking for him everywhere. They believed there were 3 people who could be behind his disappearance. Bob's rival Joe said he had been dancing all night with his girlfriend and hadn't seen Bob. Bob's classmate Dennis claimed he hadn't been feeling well, so he spent all night in the lounge. Laura, Bob's secret admirer, said she had been counting the votes for the election. The teachers knew who was behind the disappearance right away. It was Laura. Bob had already become prom king. She didn't need to count the votes. Sam's birthday. Sam is a truly special young lady. She was just 17 the day before yesterday. Next year, she'll be 20 already. What's her secret? Sam's not a time traveler or anything. She was born on December 31st. So if today is January 1st, it's correct to say that she was 17 the day before yesterday. She turned 18 the next day. She'll be 19 on the last day of this year, and next year, she'll be 20.